Hello and welcome to Maker Hangar. My name is Lucas Weekly and today we're going to be assembling the Maker Hangar Tricopter kit. And I'm going to be getting you ready to install your electronics. So here is the kit itself, and on the inside we can see that there's some packaging and we have just three main parts. So we have our arms over here, laser cut plywood pieces, and then we have our hardware bag. I'm going to set this box aside. So we'll talk about these in a second, but let's take a look at the hardware bag. As you can see, we have all our zip ties. We have the Velcro straps. This is our music wire for the tail. This is the carbon for the tail, and we have all the nuts, bolts, standoffs, everything else that we need to complete the build. So those are all the parts.
You're also going to need these tools for this part of the build.
Okay, so now we're going to focus on the laser cut parts. So let's remove them from the bag. Okay, so we have our two main body pieces right here. This is the top part of the body, and then this is the camera / battery mount. We have our motor mounts, and these are for the camera mounts. And then we have our landing gear, and then what we're going to be focusing on first is this tail assembly and then the arm tools. So I'm going to slide everything off to the side right now. Here are all the electronics you're going to need to complete your build. Links to all of these are available in the description for domestic and international orders, so you can go and check those out there. You also have your controller board, and there's a couple options down below. We'll talk about this one later in the season. But anyway, we're going to be using some of these parts in this episode, and that's why I wanted to show you them right now. So let's continue with the build. Okay, so for this, it's kind of like the little card, and this has all the parts for your tail, and they all snap out really easily. They're just held in with a couple little tabs. So I'm gonna take all these out right now.
If these pieces don't come out easily, you can use an X-Acto knife to cut them free.
Okay, so now that we have all of our tail parts popped out, we can start assembling them. So we're gonna start with this piece, and it has this kind of like weird little shape on the inside. That's because this piece right here, will slot in like this, slot in like that, and then twist. So that locks it in place. Now we're gonna put this little kind of spacer thingy right here and put that on. And then we're gonna put this piece, which is another spacer, and we're gonna put this end piece. Now I'm not gonna put this on really quick because we're gonna be gluing this in a second, but I can show you the other side. Then we're going to attach this piece. We can leave that on there. And once both of these pieces are on, we can attach the top. But we're not going to glue on the top right now because this is going to be how we cinch on our tail assembly to our boom later on. So we're going to set this to the side right now. Now, looking at this assembly, this is the motor mount, the moving motor mount. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this front piece right here, and I'm going to attach these little side pieces with their teeth sticking up inside of here. And we're going to attach this piece right here, just like that. Okay, and now we are going to take the kind of uglier looking side, this is the bottom of the laser cut piece, and put that on the bottom. And we are going to wiggle this into place. It snaps right in. So there's the moving tail assembly, and we can leave that assembled. Okay, so now we're going to be gluing, and these are CA glues, and this was in the tools you're going to need. So this is a very light CA. This is going to be medium CA for filling up gaps, and this is just a kicker to make it dry faster. Now, you're only going to need a tiny bit of this stuff, and you can find it at your local hobby shop or pretty much anywhere online. But it's so useful for so many other projects. It's just a higher end, kind of like super glue, and there's different thicknesses for different projects, and I'm sure you'll be able to figure out different applications for it as well. But for right now, to hold these pieces in place, I'm going to use some light CA to start off with. So you're going to uncap it, and I've laid down a piece of paper on my table so it protects it. And I'm just going to come in here to these seams and just fill them in kind of like hot glue. You do not want to get it on your hands. The thin CA will soak into the wood, so you don't really have to worry about getting any under the joints. Okay, and this light CA will dry in a matter of seconds, depending on how thick you put it on. So I'm just going to leave that sit right now. Now we're going to focus on this part of the tail. So we're gonna take apart that piece that we just dry fit together, and I'm gonna add some light CA, like before, into these joints to just lock it in place. Okay, and then I'm also gonna take a little bit of CA, put a dab of it right here, and center this up at the base. This is where we're gonna use the medium CA in a pretty small amount of it, because medium CA will cure in more time. So we have more time to work with our piece. So I'm gonna put a tiny little dab around here so that these two halves will stay together. So we have a second to work with it. There we go. And I'm gonna use some light CA just to reinforce this spot right here. This is one of your landing gears. Okay, now we're gonna attach this piece, and that's pretty easy too. Just going to add a little bit of CA to right here and put this piece down. Okay, like I said before, this piece will cinch down your arm when you put it through these openings. So we're gonna set this aside. We don't wanna glue it on right now. We're gonna glue it on later. Okay, so now that we have these parts glued, we can focus back on the other pieces. Now you have all your pieces ready to be assembled, but you might not like the look of the laser cut plywood, so you can actually paint all of these pieces to whatever color you want. But before you do that, you're gonna want to sand each of the pieces smooth, just to take off some of the burrs that were left from the laser cutter. And you want to do that to both sides of all the pieces. And this is why we glued the tail assembly together first, because the glue is not going to stick to the paint. Now, when you're painting, just do really quick, light coats, and then do a couple of them. Don't really worry about the weight because the Tricopter can't handle it, and you're not gonna add that much weight by just painting these pieces. Now, you can do the same thing with the arms, but the arms do need some heavy sanding because they are very rough and can be splintery. Okay, now it's smooth and ready to paint. So I'm gonna go paint all these parts right now, and I'll be back when they're all done. Okay, now I got all my pieces painted. One thing to keep in mind is after each coat, you definitely wanna sand the paint so that you don't get any bulked up areas, because the arms are gonna be folding back and forth here, and we're gonna be mounting different things onto these pieces. So you want it to be as smooth as possible. So now we're gonna move on with the assembly of the tail, where we left off before we went to go paint. So let's move on to that. So focusing back on the tail, we're going to now assemble it and make them one. After all this was painted, I did take a little file and I filed the inside of here so that the arm would slide in a lot easier. And you can do the same, or you can use sandpaper as well. So anyway, now that we have the arm, we're gonna get ready to install the carbon hinge. So grab that out of your kit, and what it consists of is 4 carbon pieces, and you have 3 larger ones, larger diameter. There's a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and an inch section, and then there's a 2.5 inch smaller diameter carbon. So now we're gonna glue together our hinge. Now these 2 smaller pieces are gonna be glued onto the middle shaft so that they are stationary, and this is gonna attach to your motor, and then this one's just gonna be a kind of a holder. And then the center one is gonna spin, so you really wanna make sure that you get no glue on the inside of right here. Well, we can't put it on if both sides are glued, so we're gonna just glue on one side first. I'm gonna put these 2 pieces aside, and this is the sign that the 3/4 inch is gonna go inside of our moving motor mount. So I'm gonna take a tiny bit, very, very tiny bit of thin CA. I'm gonna put it on the edge. Don't get it, I'm gonna take some of it off. Don't get it on the end because it can go all the way through. And then I'm just gonna position this to where it's at the end, and then twist it around to spread it all on the inside, and then wait for that to cure. Now with this little dot, this actually helped me, but you can kind of seal up the end, but be sure that you hold it upside down so that no glue goes through the center carbon. So now once this glue is dried, we can clean up the end with a bit of sandpaper. Okay, now we're gonna bond the hinge that we just glued together to the moving motor assembly. So we're gonna just slide it through, make sure that it seats in both sides, just like that. Make sure it's well seated. And now inside this well that we have here, we're gonna fill it up with hot glue. And I'm gonna put a little dab around the edge. Also, while it's still hot, you can twist it around to get everything coated. Okay, now we can set this aside and we can move on to the other part of the tail. So we have this one and we're gonna install that 1-inch piece of carbon into this, the same way as before with the hot glue. So I'm gonna slide this in, make sure it gets centered and there's nothing over the edges. And then I'm just gonna apply a little hot glue inside of here. Now the glue is dried, so we can start assembling everything. In your washer bag inside of your kit, you're gonna find 2 larger washers. The other ones are M3, and these are M4, and they're gonna slide over here as spacers. So you're gonna put one right here in between the moving assembly and the tail, and you're gonna slide it on like this. And make sure that there's space for the servo right here. Now you're gonna put on the other washer, and now you're gonna put on the last piece. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a little bit of glue inside of here. I'm gonna start rotating it as I bring it in. Snug it up a little bit, not too much. Make sure that this still moves, and then just let it set. Now that all the glue has dried and I sanded off the little nub right here, we can now install the servo. So I have my servo right here, and we're gonna put it in so that the gear, I guess you could call it, is farther down so that we have more space for the control linkages. So we're going to slide this into here. And depending on how much paint you put on this, you might have to sand this opening as well. But I'm going to make sure that this isn't in my way. And I'm going to push this in, and ta-da. So that's in position right now. We can take the control arm for the servo, and this servo only came with a 4-prong arm, and we need only 2 arms. So I'm gonna snip off 2 of them. Now we only have 2 arms. So we can just put this on here really quick. We'll zero that up later. Now we're gonna glue on the servo so that we can start hooking up the linkages. I'm gonna put some hot glue between these arms right here, and then I'm gonna put some on the inside in between these and then on the back. So I removed the control arm so we can work on it, and now I got the little bag with the easy connectors from inside the kit. Now we're going to install those on this arm. So if these don't fit in on the first try, you can always drill them out. The easy connectors fit into a 1/16 of an inch hole. Pop them in. Okay, so I got a little scrap piece of wood here, and I'm going to put these half domes on just a little bit. Just enough to be holding them in place, and then I'm gonna put them on the piece of wood and press down all the way. And now you can see that it's fully seated. Okay, so now we're gonna install these little bolts into the top, and these will hold on the control linkages. Just do it finger tight for right now. Now we can look back at our servo assembly. So I'm gonna install this right here. Okay, now we're gonna take our 2 linkages that were inside the kit, and we're gonna make a Z-bend on the end of them. So you're gonna take your pair of pliers and you're gonna put it in its tip, bend it at 90 degrees like that, and then bring it right here and bend it on 90 degrees the opposite way. And do the same thing to the other one, not the other side. Okay, now that we got both of these done, we're gonna slide it in to the hole on the outside, just like that. We're gonna do the same thing to both of them. Now to put these inside the easy connectors, it's kind of easier to just take off the whole arm. Slide in one side and slide in the other. Then we're going to position this like it was before. And that's it. So we're gonna leave it like this. You can finger tighten these so that it doesn't move, because we don't wanna cinch these down permanently yet, because this might move around, or we might need to edit it later because of the controller board or when it's flying. So leave it like that for now, and we can move on to mounting the motor right here. So you grab one of your motors, and as you can see, this might not look exactly like the motor that you might get out of the box. It's because I changed out this top piece for the larger shaft, and this is much better for multi-copters because it gives less vibration than actually mounting onto the motor shaft. So that's what I did here, and it's pretty straightforward on how to do that inside of your motor box. So what we're going to do is we're going to position the wires so that they're facing away from this towards the body when we're done. We're going to take our 6mm bolts, which come in this bag, and our M3 washers. We're only going to need 4 of these. So let me take these bolts out, and we're going to grab a bolt, put it in, line up the motor. And there you go. So I'm going to tighten these up a little bit more. Don't want to go too tight. And make sure that this still spins freely. And if it doesn't, you can always get a drill bit and widen out this hole for the motor shaft. What probably is happening on yours is that the C-clamp that holds on the shaft is catching to the side, and that's causing it to have resistance. Now you can also put Loctite on these bolts to keep them in from vibrating loose. So now that we've mounted the motor, we're going to take one of the arms. It doesn't matter which one it is because they're all the same length. I'm going to slide it in here and make sure that it's flush with this back wall so it doesn't get in the way when this is turning. Okay, so that's in a good spot. Now we're going to take our top piece that we had before that we weren't going to glue on, and now we are going to glue it onto the top. So I'm just going to cinch this in really quick so I can apply some hot glue to the sides to keep the arm in place while I install the top piece. And now we're going to clean this off and just wait for it to cool down. Once all the glue has dried, congratulations, you finished the hardest part of this build. Now you're going to grab your other 2 arms, your motor mounts, and your tools that were included in the kit. So we can set these apart really quickly, and I can explain what the tools are. So these pop out just like the tail assembly. Anyway, what they do is they give you the whole alignment so you can drill out your own arms very precisely. So in the body, there is a precise distance between 2 bolts so that the arm can slide back and forth and lock and then rotate out of place. Now, if you were trying to line this up and get the drill centered, it would take a lot of time. So that's why we made this. So you're going to pick one of these sides of your arms, lay this in, make it flush with the end and the sides, and you're going to drill out those 2 holes. And that'll give you the proper rotating spacing for the arms. And you're going to do that to the same thing on both of them. Now for mounting the 2 motors, which are right here, the motors kind of have a strange layout with the holes. 2 of the holes are separated farther apart than the other 2, and that kind of makes it difficult for mounting, but not impossible. So what we're going to do is I've designed the little motor mounts with that same layout. The wires come out between 2 of the holes. So you're going to have to stagger them if you want it to look symmetrical. And you'll see this in a little bit. That's why this, which is the motor hole guide, has different size motor holes. So the ones that are circled are the closer together ones, and then the other ones are the farther apart. So you're going to take both of your arms, you're going to drill them out on one side with this, both of them, and then you're going to alternate. One of the arms has the smaller and then one of them has the larger. This will make it so that the wires come out on the same side of the tricopter. So let's go drill out those holes right now.
Now I'm using a drill press here, and if you have access to one, definitely use it for perfectly vertical holes, but a drill will work the same. I'm using a 1/8 inch bit for the bolt holes and a 1/4 inch bit for the motor shaft.
Now that we've drilled out the holes, you can see how one of the sets of holes is longer than the other. That's when we alternated from here to here, and that'll come into play when we mount the motors in a second. And you can see how the arm rotating spacing is the same on both of these. And I know this sounds kind of silly, but make sure the holes are on the same side of the arms. You don't want to have one set of holes on here and then the other set of holes on the side. Okay. Now let's mount our motors. So we're going to take our motor mounts. Now the motor mounts, they're different. There's 2 sets. There's one with a larger opening on the inside, and then there's one with a smaller. The larger one's going to go up against the motor, and that gives space for the C-clamp that's on the outside of the shaft of the motor. So you're going to put this on top, right here, and you're going to put one of the other ones on the bottom. And it doesn't matter which one you start off with. Now I grabbed some of my hardware. These are the M3 22mm long bolts, and I got some of the M3 washers, and we're going to attach this motor. So I'm going to put this one, which is the smaller diameter holes. This is the bottom piece. I'm going to put in one of the bolts. Then I'm going to attach the other side of the motor mount, which has the larger hole. and bolt it in place. Make sure that this still spins properly, and now we're going to do the same thing to the other arm. So if you choose to use a different motor than the one that I'm talking about here, then you can always use this mounting technique instead. So a lot of the motors will come with little motor mounts like this, and the motor just bolts on into the back, and then you can just line up these holes, and you can drill out the holes and just bolt this onto it. That's another alternative way of mounting the motors if your motor doesn't line up to the ones that are supplied inside of the kit. Now that I have the two motors mounted, you can see what I meant by staggering the holes between the two arms to make the wires on each motor come out on opposite sides, which will mean that the entire thing will be symmetrical when we put it together as a tricopter. So now we're going to move on to the body. Okay, so for the body pieces, I did a lot of heavy sanding on the insides so that it's really smooth when the arms go to fold and move around on the inside. Now, we're going to be focusing on the top plate first, and you can tell it's apart because it has this sun slot arrangement for mounting different types of controller boards, anything that you want. So I'm going to set the bottom plate and the camera plate aside for this second, and this is the top plate that is going to be held up by standoffs so that you can mount other things on top of here, kind of like a shelf, and the controller board goes underneath and you can put your radio equipment on top. So I'm going to grab the standoffs. Now that I've gotten the standoffs, we're going to put them into our main body piece. So I'm going to put them through this hole and just put on one of the nuts, tighten them down finger tight. You don't have to get these too tight. Now later on, when we go to mount our controller board, then that's when we're going to screw on this top bracket. Right now you can set this to the side. We just bolted these on because it's much harder to do when the two halves are put together. So now let's move on to the bottom plate. Okay, so now I have the bottom half of the main body and also the camera / battery tray and all these little brackets. So I also grabbed the wire rope from in our parts. And I also have the M3 by 10mm bolts and all the M3 nuts. And we're going to assemble the vibration absorber, well, half of it. So moving on to right here, we're going to put a bracket on the top, and you can see there's an outline of where the wire rope's going to go. We're going to put a bracket here, and we're going to put a nut and a bolt through those holes and secure it in place. You're just going to put it on a tiny bit at first. We're going to slide in one of these. Going to put in our other one. Okay, now that I've gotten one of these in, I'm going to do the same thing for all four. So now I got all four of the wires mounted on the bottom plate, and I also put on all the brackets to the camera plate. And we're not going to install this right now, but this will make it easier for us to install the wires later. So that's it for this part, and now we can kind of like dry assemble the frame so we can see what the tricopter is going to look like. So now we got the frame pretty much assembled. All we had to do is just attach the arms to the body, and you can see how there's going to lay out right here. But we have to wait until we put all the wires in place to do that, and that's what we're going to be doing in the next episode. So next time I'll be showing you how to install all the wires and all the other electronics into your tricopter, and we'll be getting it ready for the flight controller board to be installed as well. So I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.